Hey, Shalom, Akim, Shalom, Shalom. Giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Bashim, Yahushai, Bashim, Rakakwadash. Double honors the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim. Listen, may the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will as always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson is just going to be an exhortation, to pray before, leaving your house, because, these times when you actually look and you observe what's going on and observe how the way people, essentially react as well, it's very dangerous. So this is just an exhortation, a reminder to basically to pray before, leaving your house, because these people, I'll say it like this. When Paul speaks about that conflict between those two natures, the spirit of a warth against the flesh, and these are contrary at the things you would do, and you fight against the works of the flesh, and you try to rule over your spirit. These are things, these people in the world don't do that. I want to leave it like that. These people in the world don't do that. They're not suffering from trying to fight their flesh. They're not suffering from trying to fight even their own thoughts. you know you might have wicked thoughts sometimes, and they don't have that mindset of trying to rebuke it, because their mindset is not a mindset of actually trying to preserve their life, right? So basically they're very in tune with the flesh. For them, there is no separation, right? So you know um I'll bring out this precept, and I want to just share, just a quick, you know, um, quick story. This is Matthew chapter 24, verse 12. And it says, "And because iniquity shall abound, the love of many shall wax cold." So when you go to wax cold here, I want to go to it. I'm just going to open this. The word here is psycho. It says to breathe, to blow, cool by blowing, to be made or grow or cool or cold. It's hold on. When you think about someone who's like psychotic, there is no reasoning, with these people, right? Because their faculties, to be able to, rationalize certain situations, has been basically thrown out the window because of outside circumstances. What's going on in the environment, is changing their behavior, that causes them to behave in a particular way, because, for example, you have economic shifts where things are becoming essentially, more expensive. Things are becoming, they're not able to enjoy certain pleasures anymore. So because of these, a lot of these things as well, uncertainty, breaking up of families and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of people walking around here, basically in distress. What I'm saying? So it's like, I'm just bringing out this lesson just to pray, essentially, before, leaving, your house, and then also, thanking the Lord when you make it home safe, right? Because that too, indeed is a blessing, because there is so much, spirits. As a matter of fact, let me get that. Because I was going to share a quick story, what is that? That is That's Sirach. Just bear with me. Let me look for it. Let me get my. This is Sirach chapter 39, verse 28. And it says, "There be spirits that are created for vengeance, which lay in their fury, um, lay on sore strokes in the time of their destruction. They shall pour out their force and appease the wrath of him that made them." It says, verse 29, "Fire and hail and famine and death, all these were created for vengeance." It says, "Teeth of wild beasts, scorpions, serpents, so even animals as well, and the sword punishing the wicked to destruction," right? So, this is all created for people essentially who are wicked, but this to show you the type of environment that we're in when you see certain judgments, whether it's on either like online or or even on the street. Sometimes these are examples of that, right? It's just just a reminder for us that this is what's actually going on, especially to the mass majority of our people, where it says in Ezra about these things are scourges for amendment, right? Because of their wicked behavior. But not to go too off topic, because I was driving home, one night, which is what I was thinking about before I actually wanted to start discussing this. I was driving home one night, and this dude, he was walking, and he walked in front of my vehicle, and basically, how he started just kind of getting like irritated. I was giving him basically the signal to walk because there was a sidewalk, what I'm saying? But, I probably was a little too much in the sidewalk, because it was still dark out, so I couldn't really see, right? So him, he started getting like very what's the word I'm looking for? He started behaving like very like irritated. And I remember, then he starts talking shit, right? And so eventually he walks in front of the vehicle, and then he says, "Oh, you're lucky, you're black, you're lucky you're black. Otherwise, I'll light up your car right now." And and I was kind of like, oh, okay, what's going on? I was kind of like, okay, and I started thinking to myself as I was driving away, a lot of these people are basically they're on a short fuse, if that makes sense, you know. And the scriptures give us understanding of how to de-escalate a lot of these different situations, but this will show you the kind of people that's waltzing back and forth out here, right? A lot of these people are basically on a short fuse, what I'm saying. So the wise thing, as a matter of fact, let me get this in Sirach, you know because a lot of our people, they're basically destroyed for lack of knowledge, right? So I'm kind of going into a different direction, but I sincerely, hopefully pray that this lesson, all of it is edifying, right? This is Sirach chapter 4, um verse 2, and it says, "Make not an hungry soul sorrowful, neither provoke a man in his distress." Verse 3, "Add not more trouble to an heart that is vexed." Excuse me. "And defer not to give him that is in need." And so, this is a situation where, you don't want to provoke a man, in this distress, right? The best thing, is just to ignore people like that, and then just, basically move on, right? But the point is that, people like that are already vexed. They're already, they're what's the word I'm looking for? They're like they're about to crash out. That's the term that they say in the world, but we're taught to be more spiritual, to be able to um allow the spirit to basically to prevail, right? And the scriptures talk about how wisdom, how she meet with you in basically in every thought, right? So in those kinds of situations, it's not to aggravate, a person like that, to be able to kind of like, okay, recollect, you know, and then basically to cease from strife, right? I think that's something that's in the book of Proverbs somewhere. It's the honor of a man to cease from strife, right? Because there's a lot of these people out here, right? But, yeah, it's just pray before, you leave your household. And I looked up what that actually meant. So it can, most of the time it actually means like, okay, this person is they might have a firearm, and they want to actually, get their own, they want to shoot the car, right? So that's probably what he wanted to do. you know um Let me get this here. um Bear with me 1 second. Where was I gonna go? Oh, let me get Psalms, actually. Then I'll get that. Psalms 121. This is Psalms 121, verse 8. And it says, "And the Lord Yahweh, Bashem Yahushai, shall preserve thy going out and thy coming in from this time forth, and even for and forevermore." Right? So, before, you leave your house, just say, say a prayer, protect the going in and coming out of this day today, you know, Thawadi Yahweh Bashem Shai for waking me up for another day, right? And basically, yeah, thank the Lord for, those little things, right? Because those little things, it's a lot of these people don't even make it home, right? A lot of these people don't even make it to their destination, right? So we need protection, man. We need like ultimate, you know, we need divine protection, like constantly, because these people, there's no telling what these people will do, right? Because they don't have much to lose, and when somebody doesn't have much to lose, they lose it, right? So it's just basically just to, you know, remember wisdom in those kinds of situations, not to aggravate, people like that. In the world they have terms that they use called like what they say, conflict de-escalation tactics, right? To be able to de-escalate conflict, right? Let me just get a quick example of that. This is Proverbs 15:1, and it says, "A soft answer turneth away wrath, but grievous words stir up anger." Right? So, this is it's a skill, especially if you're in the flesh. In the flesh, you feel, you can get very like irritated if someone's coming at you like that. But to remember these things is very important, because, you know, um, we want to be prevented from, falling into, hands of being destroyed, right? Basically, right? We need protection from the angels to look over us constantly. That's why it's always good to remember basically the fear of the Lord, right? Um, let's get Psalms 34. It says, Psalms 34 verse 7, it says, "The angel of the Lord encampeth around them that fear him, and deliver them. And taste, O taste and see that the Lord is good. Blessed is the man that trusteth in him," right? So, we have angels that look over us, that protect us, that protect our going outs and coming ins and so on and so forth. That's what we need, right? And that's ultimately what we need. Basically, a good example of that, is that basically that protection was when you think about, in our history with King Hezekiah, that was, an angel, completely destroyed, his the Sennacherib's Assyrian army. But the point is that, let me see if I can find that, because he did pray before that, the Lord intervened. He did pray. Let me see if I can find that real quick. 1 second. That's Second Kings. Oh shit. This is 2 Kings 19, verse 14, and it says, "And Hezekiah received the letter out of the hand of messengers and read it. And Hezekiah went up to the house of the Lord and spread it before the Lord, Yahweh Bashem El Shai." And it says, "And Hezekiah prayed before the Lord and said, O power Yahweh Bashem El Shai of Israel, which dwellest between the cherubims, thou art the power, even thou alone, of all kingdoms of the earth, that thou hast made the heaven. Bow down thy ear and hear, open, Lord, thine eyes, and see, to hear the words of Sennacherib, which hath sent him a reproach to the living power. Of the truth, Lord, the kings of Assyria have destroyed the nations and their lands, and have cast their gods into the fire, which are no gods, but the work of men's hands, wood and stone. Therefore they have destroyed them." So this is where he says, "Now therefore, O Lord, Yahweh Bashem El Shai, I beseech thee, save us out of this hand, and all the kingdoms of the earth may know that thou art a power alone, even thou only," right? So, this is Hezekiah basically making his supplication, because, Sennacherib is basically coming up, and threatening Jerusalem, right? And the Lord basically eventually came to his defense and smote the Assyrian army, right? But the point really is that Hezekiah made his supplication, and that's pretty much what's very important is to basically pray, before your going outs and your coming ins and so on and so forth, right? That protection. And because Hezekiah eventually, he received that protection on high, right? He received that divine intervention, right? And that's ultimately, in the grand scheme of things, that's really what we need is really divine, intervention, right? But let me get one more actually. Psalms 91. This is Psalms 91, verse 11, and it says, "And he shall give his angels charge over thee, and keep thee in all thy ways." So, we're in a situation where, we need protection. We need the angels to, the Lord to basically, have his angels to look over us, to protect us in these times, man. Right? So, but, really the point is really just to, pray, before leaving your house, right? You don't want to be basically, vulnerable, and making your supplication and making sure that, that relationship, so to speak, is being communicated, right? So that's pretty much the point. Lord's will, this lesson was quick and edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem El Shai. Until next time, I say Shalom.